let's go. You can probably hear the air conditioner going. It's a hot day today. In fact, it's 32.5 degrees Celsius. I'll let you know what that is in Fahrenheit. It's a Saturday afternoon, 4 p.m. and it's a nice day for a drive. So I got my very first SsangYong about 10 years ago, and it was traded in on another vehicle. I can't think what it was. I think I sold a Mazda MPV or something like that at the time, and somebody said, look, you know, would you like to trade in our SsangYong Rexton. It was an earlier model. I think it was a 2004 Series 1, and or very first of the Series 2, and like most people, I didn't know very much at all about SsangYong, and I was a bit dubious, you know, of trading a vehicle of an unknown quality, an unknown brand. At that time the brand was quite new in Australia, but I started driving the vehicle myself, and I liked it so much that in the end I kept it for about 18 months, 2 years. Had no intention of selling it after the first 3 days of driving, and it was a totally reliable vehicle. So when the opportunity came, I sold that Rexton, and I bought another one at auction, which was a little bit newer. I think it was a 2006, had slightly less kilometers on it, and it was just a nicer, cleaner quality car. So I soon fell in love with my second SsangYong. I realized I'd discovered a brand of car that just really ticked all the boxes for me. It was ideal for use in Australia. You know, it was rugged, it could go off-road, it didn't overheat on hot days, it was quite fuel, you know, fuel economy wise was quite good. So I became quite impressed with the brand. Also the quality of the build and the performance, and just the overall reliability of the vehicle was so good that I really became quite impressed with it. So after that, I saw for sale a SsangYong Chairman limousine, which was basically a Mercedes S320 sedan or saloon, and it was black with 60,000 kilometers, black leather. It had the rear sky beds, you know, it had seats that reclined back into the trunk, into the boot of the car, and was a very impressive vehicle. I happened to keep that car for over 6.5 years, and it was only for the fact that it got really bad hail damage and was starting to go in the top half in the paint, that I decided reluctantly to let it go. That vehicle has been out of my hands for 3 or 4 years now, and I know that car regularly makes trips from Brisbane down to Melbourne, which is the best part of 2,000 kilometers each way, and it does that without any problem. So it's still on the road, it's still going well, just had some cosmetic dents around it. Now this particular Rexton, I picked this up at auction about 18 to 20 months ago during COVID, and when I got it, it was a one-owner vehicle with 89,000 kilometers on the odometer, and it's a base model, sort of a base model in the sense that it's a manual transmission, manual gearbox with cloth seats. It is a 7-seater and it does have a sunroof, but it's pretty much down the bottom end of the pecking order of this model. But I was impressed with the idea of driving a manual version of this car, because I've had a few automatics and they were great, but I was told that the Tremec USA or Mexico build 5-speed manual gearbox in these were almost bulletproof. A lot of drag racers use Tremec gearboxes. Might not be the same model, but they use a Tremec gearbox for hooking up to their 800 to 1200 horsepower V8 funny cars and things like that for drag racing. Maybe not today, but they certainly did a few years ago. I also like the idea of having the manual gear change, because if you wish to tow a boat or a trailer, tow some jet skis behind you or a caravan, then having the 5-speed manual gearbox to select your gears as you wish is going to give you a bit of extra power, a bit of extra performance. And another good thing about a manual gearbox is that they use less fuel. Sometimes there can be as much as 10 or 12% fuel savings, so you can go further in one as well. You also don't have to worry so much about expensive transmission rebuilds, and also it does have a clutch which may need replacement. From what I can see now, this vehicle has done 116,000 kilometers and it's never had the clutch replaced, and the clutch works absolutely perfectly on here. I don't think it would need the clutch replaced before 200,000 kilometers from experience. And when I looked up a clutch kit for this, it was around $350 Australian, and it says allow about 3.5 hours to fit it. So I can see replacing a clutch in this for about $850, somewhere around there. So it's not the end of the world if I do have to replace a clutch. Now, despite being a rather large vehicle, this vehicle weighs over 2,200 kilograms. So it's well over 2 tons. The 2.7 litre turbo diesel is quite frugal, really. Depending on the run that you're doing, if you're travelling a lot around town, it would probably average around 10 litres per 100 k's. That's just standard diesel. With regular trips up and down the highway, sitting on 110 kilometres an hour, I average around 8.5, 8.6 8.5 or 8.6 litres per 100 kilometres, which for a vehicle of this size is quite astounding, really. You couldn't ask for much more. I know of similar size vehicles which are using 14 to 17 litres per 100 kilometres. So can you imagine in the long run how much that may cost you per year in extra fuel just to keep it running? So I've had this vehicle now for, I'm just trying to work it out, I think I got it in January 2020. Oh, sorry, no I didn't. Sorry, there's another car. I got this around about June, of 2020. And it's now the end of March, getting late in March in 2022. So I've had it for well over a year and a half, getting on towards 2 years. So actually I've probably had it for over 20 months now. And touch wood, I haven't had to do hardly anything to this vehicle to keep it running good, to maintain it. In that time, so I have put on this vehicle from 89,000 kilometres to 116,000 kilometres. I've put on 27,000 kilometres in this vehicle in that time. Not an excessive amount of use, but still quite a good distance to cover. Because I have multiple vehicles to choose from, it's not unusual for me to have anywhere from 6 to 10 cars available to me at any one time. But I do love this vehicle. If I'm doing long trips, if we're going away anywhere, if we're going fishing or we're travelling more than a couple of 100 kilometres away, this is always my vehicle of choice. I always take the SsangYong Rexton with me. This one's got 7 seats, so it's not that, you know, I'm carrying 7 passengers, but one of my daughters really loves to recline out across the 2 seats in the very rear in the 3rd row, while my other daughter can have 3 seats to herself in the middle. And you know, it's a bit like when you catch a flight and you find that it's not fully booked and there's empty seats, and you just love to grab one of those empty seats and spread out. So that's handy, having the 3rd row, 2 extra seats in the back. But the vehicle itself is quite roomy, so I choose this to take away on holidays. And any distance that I've asked it to do, it's done without any problem. It's never overheated, it's never broken down, it's never, you know, failed to start. You know, must have started 1,000 times. It's started every time, first go, without any hesitation. So, and that's not unusual, because just thinking back, I think I've had now probably about 4 or 5 Rextons. I've also had a few SsangYong Musos. I've had 2 SsangYong Chairmans, which are sort of equivalent to a Mercedes S320. And just trying to think what else I've had. I've had 2 Corandos. I've bought 3 SsangYong Corandos for customers who've said to me, you know, look out for a small to medium size SUV, preferably diesel, and I haven't got a lot of money, you know, I want to spend 4 or 5 grand. So I've often got them, you know, maybe a 2010, 2011 model SsangYong Corando. And those customers have always thanked me and said, look, you know, we've had the vehicle now 6 months, 12 months, and we absolutely love it. One of my friends, Lorna, I think she's now had her Corando for 2.5 years. It's been faultless. Her husband ended up buying through me a SsangYong Chiron. Now that's another vehicle that I really like. The SsangYong Chirons are great. Let me guess, I've had 4 or 5 Chirons probably in the last 10 years. And they've been great vehicles. I find them very practical. They're kind of like a skinnier sort of Rexton, and just a great vehicle. The SsangYong Chiron competed with the Toyota Kluger, where the SsangYong Rexton that I'm driving now competed with vehicles such as the Toyota Land Cruiser Prado, the Mitsubishi Pajero, although the Pajero has a wider body, and you know, of course the SsangYong's a little bit slimmer in that case, but they are similar sort of size vehicles, and they compete with each other quite well. It's a lot bigger than a Mitsubishi Challenger. The Challenger's quite long, but it's not very wide. The SsangYong Rexton's more of a hefty sort of vehicle, and for what you get and the price you pay, a used SsangYong Rexton is incredible value. I'm even considering buying a brand new one, a 2022 model new Rexton, but because the SsangYong Muso, the dual cab turbo diesel ute, is such a great package, starting at just $35,000 drive away with a 7-year warranty also. It's just so tempting, because I can put a bigger load in the back when we go away, and I only really need the 5 seats. I'm looking at buying a brand new one this year if I can get hold of one. They're so popular that there's at least a 6-month waiting list, and with troubles going on in the world at the moment, you know, SsangYong has released a statement saying that they don't know about production of the Muso because they're having trouble getting the ECUs, and that's quite a common problem with most car makers around the world. That doesn't apply so much to the new Rextons, but at over $50,000, I think I might probably settle for the SsangYong Muso over a new SsangYong Rexton, but only because I'd like to have that extra $15,000 to $18,000 in my pocket and still have a really great new vehicle. That doesn't mean there's anything wrong with the Rexton. I would certainly choose a brand new Rexton. But these older Rextons are so rugged and so tough. They're also so comfortable, so reliable, that this satisfies me at the moment. I mean, I don't really need to buy a new car. There's no reason for it. This vehicle is absolutely faultless, and it goes like a freight train. It really does. Sometimes when I go up in this vehicle up to the car auctions and I ask someone, you know, let's say I buy a couple of cars, and I'll say to somebody, look, can you drive my Rexton back home while I drive the new Jag or whatever it is I've bought at the auction? And when we get back, they look at me and they shake their head like something's wrong. And I said, everything okay? And they said, I can't get over that car. That drives fantastic. And I said, yes, they do. I really love my SsangYong Rexton. And so in 36, 37 years of motor dealing, I've had over 3,000 cars that I literally owned myself, not including cars that I bought for customers and sold for other people. I can pretty much have anything I like. At the moment, I actually have at home 9 vehicles, but the vehicle that I choose to drive most of the time is the SsangYong Rexton. So you'll get people, if you own a SsangYong Rexton or any SsangYong, people are going to ask you about it. They're going to say, is that a Chinese vehicle? And I always say no, it's actually a premium South Korean brand. And they say, are they a new company? They've only been around 15, 20 years. And I said, well, actually, they've been around since 1954. And they started off making military style vehicles. So, you know, this is not some new Chinese blow-in. This is a premium Korean brand that has been around for about nearly 70 years. And you know, if they are able to manufacture Korean presidential limousines, military vehicles, and fantastic diesel engines and off-road vehicles, very practical cars, and they do it for, when you consider it, a great price. The price is not expensive on a new SsangYong. They're very competitive on their pricing, very affordable compared to other makes. The only thing is, a lot of people just don't know much about SsangYong, and that doesn't make it a bad vehicle. So I'm just going to pull into this lake here. It's not far from my home, and I'll take a few photos and do a bit of a video walk around of the vehicle, and then I'll continue my chat with you. So what can I tell you about the SsangYong Rexton? Well, firstly, it's a hefty sort of vehicle. It's big, it's heavy, it's chunky, it's very well put together, and for me the most important thing is that they have proved to be very reliable. You get a lot of car for your money. They have great towing ability, excellent fuel economy, and for what you get for the price, it's very hard to beat. Now, owning a SsangYong is a little bit like joining a club where people who are in the know and have SsangYongs usually love them. Most people have never driven a SsangYong, but once people do come across the mark and they start driving a SsangYong or own one, I'd say 80% of the people who own one really love them. Now, there are a few faults and flaws with some SsangYong models. Now with these Rextons, and in fact I'll say this for all SsangYongs that I've ever driven, one thing that lets them down is the sound system. The stereos in these cars are pretty much a rubbish, especially the speakers. If you buy a SsangYong Chiron, it's probably on its second or third set of speakers. Most people have swapped them out and put in something like Sony or Pioneer or you know, JVC. Someone's changed the speakers in them because after just a year or two of use, they're pretty much like footballs, and that's about all they're good for, kicking around the backyard. The stereos always seem to work, but they don't have the greatest of sound, and the speakers let them down chronically. Even in the new model Rexton, I'm told that some people are having trouble connecting their Bluetooth. It is a much better stereo system than is installed in any of the previous models, and some people are saying it just comes down to the cable or trying to hook up an Android device, and that was a few problems, and it's a much better stereo system. I still think as a whole SsangYong is sort of let down by cheap stereo components, but that shouldn't bother people because you can replace them easily enough and cheap enough with anything you like. You can always upgrade them. It's not really a fault of the vehicle. You know, the vehicles are as tough as nails, but they're let down by like dodgy speakers and poor quality sound systems, which is strange because I'm pretty sure in South Korea they could come up with a stereo for the cars for an extra few dollars. That would solve all those problems. Other things that go wrong with SsangYongs, I've had some where the central locking system plays up. That's quite often because people keep playing with the central locking buttons like I'm doing now, and as the driver is opening the door locks and someone's yanking on it at the same time, they can break the handle off in the door. Now what happens after that is that because the system detects that one of the door locks isn't quite right, you'll have trouble with the central locking buttons going up and down all the time, and you may actually shut the door and get locked out because the locking will go down. So make sure if you've got a self-locking SsangYong that you always have your keys with you, always keep a spare key at home or somewhere, and just in case you need to get back into your vehicle. That's usually easily fixed by taking off the door card on the offending door. Quite often it's a rear door because it's kids who break them most of the time. It won't take you more than about 10-15 minutes to take that off, and sometimes you'll just find that there's a pin has come out and it's just hanging and it just needs reconnecting, and that's the system fixed quite often. That's happened to me on 3 occasions in different models. Now other problems with SsangYongs, there aren't a lot. The only repairs that I've had to do to this one is I've had to put a top idler pulley. That's the one with the grooves in it, the top one, the 6PK pulley on top, and it cost me $49. Now from what I can see in the logbooks, that's the first time it's been changed, and that was just recently at 115,000 kilometers. So for a $49 part, a genuine SsangYong part, to last that long, that's amazing, and it costs very little to replace. At the same time, I also changed the serpentine belt, which cost me, and if you want to know which one it is. It's a 6PK 2255. That belt cost me, I think it was $24 plus delivery. It was less than $30 delivered to my door, and I was able to fit that in about 10-15 minutes with just 2 sockets. And it wasn't hard. So these are a car that's kind of roomy and people at home can work on it, and the kind of things you have to do to these are usually inexpensive, just regular maintenance items. I don't think you're going to have a lot of problem with major things going wrong with these. The first one of these that I had, which was an 04 Rexton 2004, it developed a fault where when the vehicle warmed up, you'd pull up at the traffic lights and it would just stop. And someone said to me, who was a diesel mechanic, he said, I know that problem. He says they have that problem on Land Cruisers. He said it's your diesel fuel pump. He said it's going to cost you at least $3,000 to fix. And he said maybe on a SsangYong, being a rarer vehicle, he said I'd allow $3,500 to fix that. And I thought, what nonsense, just pulling figures out of the air like that. So first thing I assumed was that it could be a crank sensor. Sorry, I got that wrong. I assumed that it could be a camshaft sensor. So I bought a brand new camshaft sensor. It was $50, put it in, and it didn't make any difference. I went into a forum, and a really nice guy in Canada who had exactly the same fault says to me, it's your crank sensor. And he said my one in Canada went and I had to change it. So took his advice, leaned over the back of the motor, like I stood on a stool, put a towel, or a blanket across the engine, and just leaned over the back, and took me 1 or 2 minutes just to remove his crank sensor. Something no more difficult than a spark plug, and I just simply swapped it out with a brand new one, which cost me about $85 Australian, about $60 US, and bang, it was fixed. So what was happening was the crank sensor was getting hot, and it wasn't sending signals to the ECU, so the vehicle didn't quite know how fast the flywheel was turning, and it would just shut the vehicle down and turn it off. So what was supposed to be a $3,000 or $3,500 fuel pump problem was an $85 crank sensor problem, and that's the sort of things that can go wrong on a SsangYong. But generally, most people know the faults, and they are, they're quite few, the number of faults. They're not, large lists of faults. And if you can fix it for $85 in 10 minutes, well, that makes this a very reliable and economical, cheap car to own. So I've also had to, not in this vehicle, so all I've done in this vehicle in, whatever it is, 20 months, something like that, and about 27,000 kilometers, is I've changed a $49 idler pulley, top idler pulley, and say $30 for a belt. Other than that, I've just changed your oil every 8,000 kilometers. You don't need to. There's a 15,000 kilometer service on these interval, but oil and filter is pretty cheap. I buy it uses an oil filter cartridge. I buy an MAN, German oil filter cartridge off eBay. I get them for around $10 or $12. That's cheaper than buying an oil filter for most cars, and it's so easy to get to because the Bakelite cap is just at the back of the motor, and you just fit on the tool, turn it with your socket set, and you can actually change your oil filter standing up and just putting it down the back of the motor. And it doesn't even drip any oil. I could put a cloth around it and the cloth came out clean. So nothing major there. It does use a lot of oil to do an oil change. I just did an oil change on this one a month ago, and it took 8.5 litres of a premium synthetic oil. I used the, got it up here, the sticker, I used the Castrol Edge 5W30, and I used the best part of 2 big bottles of that. I used a 5 litre bottle, and I used 3/4 of the second bottle. was it 3/4? But there was only about a litre and a half or something like that left after I'd finished, and that was including doing the oil filter as well. So I managed to get the oil on special. Wasn't expensive. I think it was about $35 a bottle. So all up, the 2 bottles of oil and the German-made MAN filter cost me about $80 odd. So if it's as cheap as that and you can do it yourself, I just change the oil every 8,000 kilometres. And it's rare to say this with a diesel engine, but when I do the oil changes that way, it comes out reasonably clean. You're always going to get a lot of black soot and carbon in your diesel engine oil. I mean, I've had it coming out like black tar. But changing your oil every 8,000 Ks with the full synthetic and a new filter each time, yes, it's coming out dirty, it's black, but you can tell if you run the oil through your fingers and that, it's very clean. It's got, it's holding up really well. And when I've completely drained the oil out of the engine and looked down into the motor, it's as clean as a whistle. All the components that I see in there are bright, shiny silver. Maintaining your SsangYong doesn't have to be expensive. Sometimes you might have to buy parts in. I get them off eBay. I've even bought parts directly from South Korea. The longest it's taken me to get parts is generally three days would be about average. I think the most I ever waited for a part was about 2 weeks to come in from South Korea. But generally those parts have not kept the car off the road. It's been something like an electric window winder, even the crank sensor. I had it come from South Korea in just over a week. That vehicle was off the road for that week because it would only run for 15 minutes and then it would stop. But I haven't had difficulty getting parts. There's also a lot of these in wreckers yards and you can get second-hand parts pretty cheap. So look, my experience of owning and driving these SsangYong Rextons, they're just a great car. They really are. I'm a big fan of them, and as I said, I can drive any car I want. I have my choice of cars. Every week I go to the auctions to buy cars. I see at least 500, maybe 1,000 cars a week, every week going up for sale. I can buy anything I like. When I go through the catalogue, the first thing I look for is a SsangYong, because if I find a good SsangYong, I have buyers waiting for them straight away. I know I'm going to probably have a trouble-free ride, maybe except for replacing some speakers in the door or something like that, which I've done so many times now, it's a piece of cake. And I know that they're going to be reliable vehicles, and I've got to put warranties on the cars that I sell. I wouldn't warranty a used SsangYong if I was worried about it coming back in the next 3 months, because I'm the one who's got to pay to fix it. So I am fussy what I buy, but I always buy SsangYongs. I've even bought a couple of Actions for friends of mine. I'm not so keen on the Actions. To me, they're a little bit below par compared to Rextons, Chirons, and the Mussos. But they can be still a good cheap pickup truck, a good cheap ute. There are a few more problems with the Actions, but still, people who I've got them for swear by them and say, you know, what great vehicles they are. They do look like someone's hit them with an ugly stick. They're not a beautiful vehicle by any stretch of the imagination, but they are still a good vehicle. But today we're talking about the Rexton, and a lot of what I'm saying about the Rexton also applies to the Musso ute. The Musso in other markets is also known as a Rexton Sports or Rexton Sports Utility. You can pretty much, whatever I've said today about the SsangYong Rexton, you can apply that to the Mussos with the same driveline and running gear. Just great vehicles. So as I said, I've owned all sorts of cars. I mean, I've had Mercedes, BMW, I had a Bentley Mulsanne Turbo, which came from the British High Commission in Hong Kong. An amazing car. It was great. but I didn't enjoy it. And one of the reasons I didn't enjoy it was it used 24 litres of premium 98 octane fuel per 100 kilometres. It used to cost me $30 to drive to the local shops. I could afford the car, I couldn't afford the fuel. It was just insane fuel consumption. And here's this vehicle, which weighs about the same. I'd actually say it's a lot more practical. Doesn't draw people's attention, like no one's going to turn their head and say, wow, look, there's a SsangYong. But I just love it because it's so good on fuel. At 8.5 litres per 100 Ks is what I get because I mostly do highway travelling. It's just incredible. What's not to love about it? And it doesn't cost anything like a Bentley is going to cost you. So just to let you know, I purchased this vehicle from an auction, and it was one owner, had 89,000 Ks, and for this particular car I paid $5,100 at auction. Australian dollars. That would be something like about 4,000 US dollars. It's a 2009 model, and when I got it, it was in absolutely mint condition. The only thing that was wrong with this was the petrol flap had been broken off, and we think that was done by the truck driver. He like caught it on something and ripped it off. It only cost me $50 to get a replacement one which exactly matches it. You can't tell it from original. And that wasn't a fault of the car, that would just happen to be broken off by negligence as far as we know. Now, as I said, I've probably spent less than $100 on parts servicing this, plus your oil and filter. It's been very cheap to own, totally reliable. The family's gone away now and done, I think, 4, 5 trips in this. Beautiful trips up to Harvey Bay and down to Byron Bay, and you know, driven it all over the place. And I drive it to Brisbane and back, you know, which is a 150 kilometre round trip. I do it regularly, and it's never grumbled, it's never complained once. Even now as I'm sitting here, I'm just watching the rev counter, and the needle is sitting just dead straight. It's not quavering or moving a millimetre, and the vehicle always sits under half temperature all the time, and it never budges from it. Even when there's been days of 42, 43 degrees Celsius, it's fine. It doesn't notice it. A lot of these Rextons are sold in countries like Russia, the Middle East, all around Asia, South America, the UK. I don't know about the USA and other parts of Europe, but there's a lot of these. For example, I follow a page, the SsangYong page of Sri Lanka, and they swear by them in Sri Lanka, driving them through rivers and you know, unsealed roads. They're very popular in Australia for towing. You can start them up at minus 30 degrees in Russia, and they don't overheat at 50 degrees Celsius in Western Australia. They're just a very good vehicle, and I think it's probably one of the best kept secrets in the used car market, especially if you're looking for a people mover or an off-roader or something for towing. It's very hard to go past SsangYongs, and it's very hard to go past a SsangYong Rexton. Okay, well, I hope you've enjoyed this talk. I hope it's been informative for you, and if you do get a chance to own or even just to drive one of these SsangYong Rextons, I say go for it. I think you'll be impressed. Okay, well, it's goodbye from me. Thanks very much, and if you've enjoyed this video, hopefully you will like and subscribe. I'd love to get to 1,000 subscribers, and I intend on doing a lot of car reviews. I also do travel videos and cooking, and also I do videos about life in Australia in general. So if any of that tickles your fancy, please like and subscribe, and it's goodbye from Daz. See you later.